Good evening, friends. Tonight, we'll drift into a calm and ancient world, a world carved in clay and whispered through millennia, where the boundary between gods and humans was as thin as morning mist over the Euphrates. Dim your lights now, settle under your blanket, let your shoulders drop, take a slow, gentle breath in and out. Where are you listening from right now? What time is it in your country? Perhaps the moon is high where you are, or maybe dawn is just beginning to touch your window. Wherever you are, you're exactly where you need to be. Tonight, we're traveling back, far back, to the land between two rivers, where the first cities rose from the dust, where writing was born on wet clay, and where ancient tablets speak of something extraordinary, something hidden in plain sight for thousands of years, a lost alliance between gods and humans. We'll walk through temple courtyards at dusk, listen to the scratch of reeds on clay, smell the barley bread baking in outdoor ovens, and discover the quiet, unhurried secrets that the Sumerians left behind. If this peaceful journey helps you unwind tonight, feel free to like and subscribe, only if it feels right. No pressure, just an invitation to return to this gentle place whenever sleep feels far away. Now, close your eyes if you haven't already, and let me take you back 5,000 years, to a world that moves at the pace of river water, slow, steady, eternal. Let's begin. Let me take you back to a workshop in the city of Uruk, around 3200 BCE, when the summer heat made the air shimmer like silk scarves hanging in the breeze. Imagine stepping into a small room with walls of sun-baked brick, where the only sounds are the soft pat-pat-pat of hands shaping clay and the distant murmur of the marketplace outside. A scribe sits cross-legged on a woven mat, a lump of wet clay resting on a wooden board before him. His name might have been Kushim, or perhaps that was just his title, we're not entirely sure, because Kushim shows up on one of the oldest written documents we have, and honestly, it might just mean accountant. Imagine being remembered for 5,000 years, and historians still aren't sure if that's your name or your job description. That's like someone in the year 7025 finding your employee badge and debating whether manager was your actual name. The clay is cool and smooth under his fingers. He picks up a reed stylus, just a simple piece of river reed, cut at an angle to make a wedge-shaped tip. This is how cuneiform begins, with the simplest tools, a stick and mud, basically. And yet, what emerges from this humble combination will change human consciousness forever. Have you ever wondered what the very first written words were about? Poetry, perhaps? Prayers to the gods? Love letters? Well, not exactly. The earliest tablets we've found are receipts, grocery lists, inventory records, 32 jars of beer, 19 bushels of barley, 7 goats. The first human writing is basically an ancient spreadsheet, which, when you think about it, is deeply relatable. Humanity's first thought upon inventing writing wasn't to compose epic poetry, it was to keep track of who owed whom beer. But let's not judge our Sumerian ancestors too harshly. Those beer receipts and barley counts were revolutionary. They meant that human memory could extend beyond a single lifetime. They meant that knowledge could travel without the knower. They meant that agreements made today would still be binding tomorrow, even if everyone involved had forgotten the conversation. Our scribe presses the reed into the clay, making small wedge-shaped marks, cuneiform, from the Latin cuneus, meaning wedge. The marks are elegant in their simplicity, combinations of straight lines and angles that form symbols, and symbols that form words, and words that form, well, mostly tax records at first. But give it time. The workshop is peaceful. Late afternoon light filters through a high window, illuminating dust motes that drift like tiny stars. Outside, you can hear a vendor calling out, probably selling dates or dried fish. Someone laughs. A donkey brays in the distance. Life in Uruk moves at a gentle, predictable rhythm. The scribe finishes one tablet and sets it aside to dry. Tomorrow, it might be fired in a kiln, hardening it into something that will last longer than bronze, longer than empire, longer than memory itself. Or it might just be left in the sun, baked hard by that relentless Mesopotamian heat, the kind of heat that makes you move slowly, think slowly, breathe slowly. Now, here's where our story gets interesting. Among all those mundane receipts and records, among the endless tallies of grain and livestock, other tablets began to appear. Tablets that spoke of something else entirely. Tablets that described the Anunnaki, the great gods who came down from the heavens. Tablets that outlined a relationship between divine beings and human civilization that was far more intimate, far more collaborative than we often imagine. But we'll get to that slowly. There's no rush, we have all night, and the ancient world isn't going anywhere. It's been waiting 5,000 years already. It can wait a few more hours while you drift toward sleep. The scribe stretches his back, rolling his shoulders. His fingers are cramped from the precise work. Being a scribe in ancient Sumer was a prestigious position. It meant years of training in the Adaba, the tablet house, what we might call a school. Young students would copy and recopy the same texts over and over, their hands learning the muscle memory of each sign, each symbol. It was meditative work in its way. Repetitive, calming, the kind of task that quiets the mind. Think about that for a moment. These young scribes, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, sitting in cool rooms, copying texts by the light of oil lamps, their minds entering that focused, peaceful state that comes from repetitive, skilled work. Not so different from us, really. Looking for calm in a world that could be chaotic. Finding peace in pattern and purpose. The clay tablets weren't just practical tools. They were sacred objects, in a sense. They captured something ephemeral, the spoken word, the fleeting thought, and made it permanent, made it real. The Sumerians believed that words had power. To write something down was to give it weight in the world, to make it true in a way that speaking alone could not. And so when they wrote about the gods, when they described Anu, the Sky Father, or Enlil, Lord of the Wind, or Enki, the wise one who loved humanity, they weren't just telling stories. They were recording reality as they understood it. They were documenting a relationship that shaped every aspect of their lives. Our scribe picks up another ball of clay. He kneads it briefly, feeling for any stones or irregularities that might mar the surface. The clay comes from the riverbank, that rich alluvial soil that makes this land so fertile. Everything here comes from the river. The water, the fish, the reeds for building, the clay for tablets and bricks. The Tigris and Euphrates are the lifelines of this civilization, the veins through which everything flows. He flattens the clay into a smooth tablet about the size of your palm. Perfect for holding. Perfect for reading. These tablets were designed to be portable, to be passed from hand to hand, to be stored in clay jars or wooden boxes. They were books and newspapers and text messages of their age, all rolled into one. And as he begins to mark this new tablet, the reed moving with practiced precision across the soft surface, we can almost see over his shoulder. I almost read what he's writing. Something about the temple storehouses. Something about offerings to Inanna. Something about the delicate balance between human need and divine requirement. But your eyes are growing heavy now. That's all right. Let them close. The scribe will continue his work whether we watch or not. The clay will dry. The words will remain. And we can drift for a moment, floating like those dust motes in the ancient sunlight, suspended between waking and sleep, between our world and theirs. The sound of the reed on clay is rhythmic, soothing. Pat, press, slide. Pat, press, slide. Like a gentle rain on a rooftop. Like waves lapping at a shore. Like the beating of your own calm, slow heart. And as we step away from that quiet workshop, leaving our scribe to his patient labor, let your mind drift toward another peaceful place. The first pale light of dawn is touching the ziggurat's highest terrace as we step into the temple kitchens of Uar, around 2100 BC. The air here is already warm, but it carries a coolness from the night that will soon burn away under the climbing sun. Imagine walking across smooth stone floors, worn slightly concave by thousands and thousands of footsteps over generations. The kitchens are vast, room after room dedicated to preparing food not just for the priests and priestesses, but for the gods themselves. Just the gods? Because in Sumerian belief, the gods needed to eat just as humans did. They required daily meals, served at specific times, prepared in specific ways. This is where the alliance between gods and humans becomes tangibly, beautifully practical. A baker is already at work, though the sun has barely cleared the horizon. She's shaping barley dough into flat rounds that will be slapped against the inner walls of a clay oven, a tandoor, basically the ancient ancestor of a tandoor. The oven has been heating all night, its coals glowing like a captured sunset. When she presses the dough against the hot clay interior, it will hiss and bubble and fill the air with the most wonderful smell, fresh bread, smoky and warm. Have you ever noticed how the smell of baking bread makes you feel instantly safe? Instantly home? The Sumerians felt that too. Bread was life itself. They even used the same word, ninda, for both bread and food in general. If you had bread, you would survive. If you didn't, you wouldn't. It was that simple. The baker works with practiced ease, her hands moving in patterns learned from her mother, who learned from her mother, who learned from hers, an unbroken chain of knowledge stretching back to the very first person who thought to grind grain and mix it with water and expose it to fire. Which, when you think about it, is kind of miraculous. Somewhere in deep history, someone looked at a stalk of grass and thought, I bet I could eat that if I do about 17 different things to it first. And they were right. Nearby, another cook is preparing a more elaborate dish. A stew, perhaps, for the noon offering. She's chopping onions. Yes, they had onions, the sharp, sweet smell mixing with the bread smoke and the lingering scent of the palm oil burning in small lamps around the kitchen. Into a large pottery vessel go the onions, some leeks, garlic, chunks of mutton, chickpeas, a handful of cumin seeds, some coriander. She pours in water from a jar, adds a pinch of salt from the precious stores, salt brought up from the Gulf, valuable as silver, and sets the whole thing to simmer over a carefully maintained fire. This stew will cook slowly all morning, the flavors marrying and deepening, becoming something greater than the sum of its parts. Around midday, it will be ladled into a fine bowl, perhaps one painted with red geometric designs, and carried up to the temple's inner sanctuary, where it will be placed before the statue of the god. The god will consume the essence of the meal, and then later, the priests will eat the physical food. Waste not, want not. The gods, apparently, were more interested in the spiritual calories than the actual proteins and carbohydrates. It's kind of beautiful when you think about it. This idea that gods and humans could share a meal, that the distance between divine and mortal could be crossed by something as simple and universal as eating together. Sharing food is how humans have always built relationships, sealed agreements, and shown love. The Sumerians simply extended that logic to include their deities. The kitchen is filling with people now as the dawn brightens. A young apprentice is grinding barley in a stone quern, pushing the handstone in circles, 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 a meditative, monotonous task. The grain crushes with a soft, gritty whisper. She'll be at this for hours, producing the flour that will become today's bread, tomorrow's beer, next week's porridge. Beer. Let's talk about beer for a moment. The Sumerians loved beer. They had at least 8 different types. They drank it through long straws made of reeds or precious metals. Because beer back then wasn't filtered. It was thick, nutritious, slightly sour, more like a liquid bread than the clear lagers we know today. It was safer to drink than water, more nutritious than wine, and frankly, it made the heat more bearable. Mothers gave it to their children. Workers received it as wages. Poems were written in its honor. The goddess Ninkasi was the divine patroness of beer, and we actually have a hymn to her that doubles as a beer recipe. It's basically the ancient equivalent of those cooking shows where everything rhymes. Take some date paste, nice and sweet, mix with barley, can't be beat. A priest enters the kitchen, and everyone straightens slightly, though not in fear, more in respect. He's an older man, his head shaved smooth as was the custom for temple servants, his white linen robe spotless despite the early hour. He's here to inspect the offerings, to make sure everything is prepared correctly. The relationship between gods and humans was built on reciprocity. Humans provided food, shelter, and worship, and in return, the gods provided protection, prosperity, and order in the cosmos. But that relationship had to be maintained with care, with precision. You couldn't just throw any old thing on a plate and expect divine favor. The gods appreciated quality. They had standards. The priest samples the stew, nodding. He examines the bread, breaking a piece and inhaling its aroma. He checks the dates that have been arranged on a platter, their skins glistening with honey. Dates were one of the great staples of Mesopotamia, sweet, energy-dense, delicious. Basically the ancient energy bar. You could eat them fresh, dried, or pressed into cakes. You could make date wine, date syrup, date paste for sweetening other dishes. The date palm was so valuable that laws were written about it. Cutting down someone else's date palm was a serious crime, punishable by hefty fines. Which, honestly, fair enough. Each tree was a source of food for decades. You don't mess with someone's food supply. Satisfied, the priest gives a small gesture of approval and glides back out, leaving the kitchen workers to continue their labor. There's something deeply calming about watching skilled people do familiar work. The way the baker's hands shape dough without conscious thought. The way the cook knows exactly when to add each ingredient, without measuring, without timing, just by feel and experience. This is knowledge held in the body, not the mind. Knowledge that lives in muscle memory and instinct. And in a way, that's another aspect of the alliance between gods and humans. The gods gave humans the knowledge of agriculture, of brewing, of cooking, of all the arts of civilization. At least, that's what the myths said. Enki, the wise god, the trickster, the one who loved humanity best. He was credited with teaching people how to farm, how to build, how to write. He gave away the divine secrets because he thought humans deserved them. The other gods weren't always pleased about this. But Enki didn't care. He saw potential in these mud-born creatures, these humans who were created, the myths said, to do the labor the gods themselves no longer wanted to do. Which sounds like a raw deal until you think about it more carefully. If humans were created to serve the gods, and serving the gods meant growing food, building cities, creating art, developing writing, brewing beer, baking bread, composing music, well, humans basically got to claim the entire world as their workshop. Got to exercise creativity and skill and intelligence. Got to build something called civilization. The gods might have won the deal in the short term, but humanity won the long game. The kitchen is fully awake now. Voices blend into a gentle murmur. Pots clink. The fire crackles. Someone is singing quietly a work song, probably something rhythmic to match the grinding or stirring or kneading. The melody is simple, repetitive, soothing. You can almost smell it, can't you? The bread, the stew, the wood smoke. You can almost feel the warmth of the ovens, the coolness of the stone floor under your feet. You're there and here at the same time, suspended between worlds, between eras. Let that feeling wash over you. The kitchen noises fading into a gentle background hum. The warm, yeasty smell of bread becomes the smell of your own blanket, sun-dried and soft. The ancient light blending with the darkness behind your eyelids. And now, let your mind drift toward another peaceful place. The sun is setting over Nippur, around 1800 BCE, painting the mud brick buildings in shades of amber and rose. We're approaching the Adaba, the tablet house, the school where young boys come to learn the art of the scribe. Step inside with me. The entrance is narrow, the walls thick to keep out the day's heat. Inside, the air is cooler, scented with clay dust and lamp oil. The main room is simple, just walls and floor and a few high windows that let in light without letting in too much heat. No desks, no chairs. Students sit cross-legged on reed mats spread across the packed earth floor. There are perhaps 20 boys here, ranging in age from 7 to 17. This is not a school for everyone. Scribe training is expensive, requiring years of study, and only families with some means can afford to send their sons. But for those who complete the training, the world opens. A scribe can work in the temple, in the palace, in the marketplace. A scribe is valuable, respected, literate. The headmaster, whom the students call Amiya, the expert, is an older man with a stern face and surprisingly kind eyes. He's been teaching boys to write for 30 years. He's seen hundreds of students struggle with the same challenges, make the same mistakes, have the same small victories. He could do this in his sleep, and yet he still approaches each day with patience because he knows, he remembers, how hard this is at first. Writing cuneiform is not intuitive. It's not like learning an alphabet where each symbol represents a sound. Cuneiform signs can represent sounds, yes, but they can also represent entire words or concepts, or they can be determinatives that tell you how to read the next sign. It's like if English used some letters phonetically, but also meant apple, the fruit, but only when it appeared before certain other letters, and also sometimes indicated that the following word was a type of food. Confused yet? Exactly. That's what these boys are dealing with. A young student, maybe 9 years old, is hunched over his practice tablet, carefully copying a standard text. It's a hymn to Enlil, the king of the gods, lord of wind and storm. He's probably copied this same hymn 50 times already. His hand is cramping. His eyes hurt from concentrating. He's been at this since dawn, and the sun is setting, and he's tired and hungry and starting to wonder if maybe he could convince his father that being a fisherman wouldn't be so bad after all. But he keeps going. Press, press, slide. The wedge-shaped marks formed slowly. And here's the thing, he's not just learning to write. He's absorbing the culture, the religion, the literature, the worldview of his entire civilization. Those hymns he's copying over and over, they're teaching him theology. Those administrative texts, economics and law. Those proverbs and wisdom sayings, ethics and philosophy. The Adaba is where Sumerian culture replicates itself, passing from one generation to the next, encoded in wet clay. The headmaster walks slowly between the rows of students, glancing at their work. He pauses behind the young boy, looks at the tablet, makes a small sound that might be approval or might just be acknowledgement. The boy's shoulders relax slightly. Not bad, good enough. Across the room, an older student, maybe 16 or 17, is working on something more advanced. He's composing an actual letter, a practice exercise in the epistolary form. Say to Lord Shulgi, my king. Thus says Pusur Shulgi, your servant. It's formulaic, but within the formula, there's room for individual expression. This is the equivalent of a high school student writing their first proper essay, finding their voice within the conventions of the form. Have you ever wondered what students complained about 5,000 years ago? We know, actually, because some of their school texts survived. They complained about the same things students complain about today. The school day is too long. The teachers are too strict. The curriculum is boring. One text describes a student's typical day, and it's exhausting just to read. Up before dawn. Rush to school. Get beaten for being late. Get beaten for talking. Get beaten for standing up without permission. Copy texts all day. Get beaten for sloppy work. Go home. Eat quickly. Copy more texts for homework. Sit. Repeat. And yet, somehow, they persevered. Because the alternative, illiteracy, a life of manual labor with no possibility of advancement, was worse. The lamplight is growing more important now as the natural light fades. Small clay lamps, just dishes of palm oil with a wick of twisted fiber, sit at intervals around the room, their flames making the shadows dance softly against the walls. The flickering light is gentle on tired eyes. It creates a cocoon of focus in the gathering dark. One of the younger boys has fallen asleep over his tablet. It happens. The headmaster notices but doesn't scold. Instead, he gently touches the boy's shoulder, waking him. A quiet word. The boy sits up, rubs his eyes, picks up his stylus again. Kindness where you'd expect severity. Perhaps the headmaster remembers being that young, that tired, that overwhelmed. Perhaps he understands that learning happens better with encouragement than fear, despite what his own teachers might have believed. The tablets themselves are beautiful objects if you look closely. The clay is smooth, prepared with care to avoid any lumps or pebbles. The marks are precise, each wedge angled just so. Good handwriting was a source of pride. Scribes would sometimes add a colophon at the end of a text, a little note identifying themselves. Written by so-and-so, son of so-and-so, scribe of you are. Like signing a work of art, because that's what it was. Art and craft and labor all combined. Among the texts that students copied were the stories of the gods, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Enuma Elish, the descent of Inanna to the underworld. And woven through all these stories was that consistent thread. The gods and humans existed in relationship, in alliance, in mutual dependence. The gods needed humanity's worship and service. Humans needed the gods' protection and favor. Neither could exist without the other. It's a profoundly different worldview than the one that would come later, where gods or God existed independent of human belief, where the divine was wholly other and separate. For the Sumerians, the boundary was permeable. Gods could walk among humans. Humans could ascend to divine status. The king was both human and touched by divine power. The temple was where earth and heaven met and overlapped. And these boys, scratching away at their tablets in the lamplight, were learning to navigate that overlapping space. They were becoming the mediators, the translators, the ones who could read the divine will and make it comprehensible to common people. Heavy responsibility for tired young shoulders. The headmaster claps his hands softly. Enough for today. The boys set down their styluses with barely concealed relief. They file out into the twilight, into the blue hour when the sky is the same color as deep water. Their voices fade into the distance, calling goodbyes, already thinking about dinner. The headmaster remains for a moment, tidying the practice tablets, banking the coals of the small brazier that provides warmth on cool evenings. He picks up one of the discarded tablets, a child's work, unsteady but earnest. He smiles. They all start like this, and some of them will become masters, will compose works that live forever, and will add their voices to the great conversation of civilization. But that's tomorrow's concern. Tonight, there's just this quiet moment, this peaceful room, this sense of work done and rest earned. Let that peace seep into you now. The stillness of the empty school. The satisfaction of effort completed. The gentle transition from day to night. And as we step away from that quiet tablet house, now let your mind drift toward another peaceful place. It's the height of spring in the city of Uruk, around 2400 BCE, and the entire city is preparing for the most important ritual of the year, the sacred marriage between the king and the high priestess of Inanna. But before your mind goes somewhere scandalous, let me walk you slowly through what this actually meant, because it's more complex and more interesting than it might sound at first. We're standing in the temple complex as evening approaches. The air is thick with the scent of myrrh and cedar smoke, expensive incense imported from distant lands, reserved for only the most sacred occasions. The temple walls are decorated with woven hangings, brilliant textiles dyed with indigo and madder root, creating blues and reds that seem to glow in the lamplight. The sacred marriage wasn't just a religious ritual. It was a renewal of the cosmic order, a reenactment of the divine marriage between Inanna, goddess of love and war, and Dumuzi, the shepherd god. When the king and priestess came together, they weren't just themselves anymore. They became vessels for divine presence. The boundaries dissolved. Heaven and earth merged, if only for one symbolic night. The priestess is being prepared in the inner chambers. We can't see her directly, but we can imagine the care being taken. She's bathed in water mixed with aromatic oils. Her skin is rubbed with fragrant unguents until it gleams like polished bronze. Her hair, probably long and dark, is arranged elaborately, woven with ribbons and small gold ornaments that chime softly when she moves. She's dressed in the finest linen, so finely woven it's almost transparent, layered to create an effect of a shimmering cloud. Around her neck, multiple strands of lapis lazuli and carnelian beads. On her wrists, heavy bracelets. On her fingers, rings. She is being transformed from priestess into goddess, from human into divine. The king is undergoing similar preparations in another part of the temple. He's been ritually purified, dressed in ceremonial robes, anointed with oils that make his skin shine. He fasted for 3 days, preparing his body to become a sacred vessel. Tonight, he's not just a king. He's Dumuzi himself, the beloved of the goddess, the one who brings fertility to the land. Because that's what this is really about. Fertility, renewal. The spring planting has just been completed, and the entire year's survival depends on the crops growing strong. The sacred marriage is sympathetic magic on a grand scale, as above, so below. As the god and goddess unite, so will the seeds and the soil. As divine love is consummated, so will the land become fruitful. The people of Uruk are gathering in the streets around the temple complex. This is a public festival, even though the ritual itself will happen in private. There's music, drums and lyres, and some kind of reed instrument that sounds like a reedy flute. People are dancing, though not wildly. This is a sacred occasion, after all. The dancing is formal, ritualized, patterns passed down through generations. Food is being distributed. Bread and dates and beer, provided by the temple warehouses. This is part of the reciprocal relationship. The gods provide for the people, and the people provide for the gods, and everyone takes care of everyone else. The beer is flowing freely, which helps create a sense of communal celebration, of barriers breaking down, of normal rules being temporarily suspended. A procession is forming. Temple musicians take their places at the front, followed by priests and priestesses in their finest attire, followed by representatives from each quarter of the city carrying offerings, flowers, fruits, small clay figurines. The procession will wind through the city streets, allowing everyone to participate, before returning to the temple for the culmination of the ritual. The sun has fully set now, and the city is illuminated by thousands of torches and lamps. The effect is magical. The mud brick buildings seem to glow from within. Shadows dance everywhere. The smoke from all those flames rises into the night sky, carrying prayers and hopes and desires upward to the heavens. Have you ever been part of something larger than yourself? A festival, a concert, a gathering where individual identity dissolves into collective experience? That's what this is. The entire city becomes one organism, one body, one voice calling out to the divine. The high priestess emerges from the temple, and a hush falls over the crowd. She's stunning. Not necessarily because of her individual beauty, though she might well have been beautiful, but because of what she represents in this moment. She's the goddess incarnate. She's every woman and woman itself. She's the principle of life and love and the fierce protection of what is cherished. The king emerges from the opposite side of the temple. He too is transformed. He moves with a grace that seems superhuman, his face serene, his eyes looking at something beyond what the crowd can see. They approach each other slowly. The musicians play. Singers begin a hymn. We actually have a written version of a love song between Inanna and Dumuzi, full of pastoral imagery. In the garden, in the place of pure water, you stand like an apple tree. It's beautiful, sensual without being crude, celebrating the holiness of desire, the sacredness of bodies, the divinity of union. The king and priestess meet. Their hands touch. Even from a distance, you can feel the electric charge of the moment. This is what the whole year has been building toward. This is the hinge point where everything turns from death to life, from winter to spring, from scarcity to abundance. They turn together and walk slowly into the inner temple, disappearing from view. The doors close. And now, in the streets, the festival really begins. The formal ceremony is over. What remains is celebration, pure and simple. People drink and dance and laugh. Couples slip away into shadowy corners. There's a sense that normal rules are suspended tonight. What happens during the sacred marriage festival doesn't count against you. It exists outside ordinary time. But inside the temple, something quieter is happening. We can only imagine it from the fragments of texts that survived. The king and priestess share a ritual meal. They exchange ritual phrases, ancient words whose original meanings have been half forgotten but whose power remains. They enact the marriage, whatever form that actually took, watched only by the statue of the goddess herself, illuminated by a single perfect flame. And in the morning, the king will emerge renewed, empowered for another year of rule. The priestess will return to her duties. The fields will grow green. The date palms will swell with fruit. The sheep will bear twins. Life will continue. It's an astonishing idea when you really sit with it. That human actions could affect divine reality. That ritual could make something true that wasn't true before. That the barrier between God and human was so thin it could be crossed by anyone properly prepared, properly purified, properly willing to set aside ego and become a vessel for something larger. The modern mind struggles with this. We want clear categories. Human over here, divine over there. Heaven is separate from earth. But the Sumerians lived in a world of continuums, not categories. Everything shaded into everything else. The king was human and divine. The priestess was a woman and goddess. The temple was a building and heaven. The ritual was theater and reality. And maybe, as you lie there in the darkness, letting these ancient images wash over you, maybe you can feel the appeal of that worldview. The comfort of living in a world where you're never entirely alone, where the gods are as close as the next temple, where the boundary between ordinary and sacred can be crossed with the right words, the right actions, the right state of mind. The festival sounds are fading now. People are going home, satiated, sleepy, content. The torches are burning down. The music is becoming softer, slower. Soon the city will sleep, wrapped in the blanket of divine favor, secure in the knowledge that the cosmic order has been renewed. And you too can let yourself drift now, secure and safe, as we step away from that holy night. The dawn is cool and fresh as a merchant caravan assembles at the northern gate of Lagash, around 2200 BC. We're going on a journey today, a trading expedition to the distant mountains where the great cedars grow, the source of the precious timber that Mesopotamia lacks. Join me as we walk through the caravan, taking in the organized chaos of departure. There are perhaps 30 pack donkeys, each capable of carrying about 100 pounds of goods. The donkeys are patient creatures, long-eared and gentle-eyed, already loaded with the trade goods that will be exchanged for timber, ingots of copper, bales of wool textiles, jars of sesame oil, bags of barley. These are the products of the river plain, the things that the mountain people need and desire. The merchant himself is a prosperous man named Uarningirsu. He's made this journey a dozen times before. He knows the routes, knows the dangers, knows which villages are friendly and which require careful diplomacy. He's accompanied by his adult son, who's learning the trade, and by a group of hired donkey handlers and guards. This is not a leisure trip. It's a dangerous business venture that will take weeks, possibly months, and could end in disaster if they're unlucky. Bandits, flash floods, disease, getting lost, running out of supplies. The profit margin is high, but so are the risks. Uarningirsu does a final check of the loads, making sure everything is balanced, making sure the ropes are properly tied. A donkey with an unbalanced load will develop sores, and a lame donkey in the wilderness is a serious problem. Everything must be right before they set out. His wife and daughters have come to see him off. There's no dramatic farewell. This is normal life for them. But there's a moment where his wife presses a small clay token into his hand, an amulet inscribed with protective symbols, blessed by a priest at the local temple. May Ninurta, god of travelers, keep him safe. May he return with profit and health. The caravan master calls out. Time to go. The lead donkey begins to walk, and the rest follow, their hooves making a gentle clop-clop sound on the packed earth road. Uarningirsu and his son fall in with the column. The gate guards wave them through. And just like that, they're beyond the city walls, out in the open landscape, committed to the journey. The first few days are easy, relatively speaking. They're following the river north, through settled lands. They pass through villages where people barely look up from their work. Caravans are common enough. They pass fields where farmers are tending the young barley plants, carefully regulating the water flow from irrigation ditches. The landscape is flat, almost featureless, the horizon broken only by lines of date palms and the occasional distant temple tower. The rhythm of walking is meditative, one foot in front of the other. The sun climbing, the temperature rising, the regular plod of the donkeys creating a steady beat. No one talks much. It's too hot, and besides, what is there to say? Everyone here knows their job. They stop at midday to rest and water the animals. There's a well at a small caravanserai, a way station where travelers can rest. It's just a walled enclosure with a well and some shade, but it's precious for all that. They unload the donkeys to let them rest properly, draw water from the well, eat a simple meal of barley bread and onions and dates. The water is lukewarm and slightly brackish but wonderfully refreshing. An older traveler at the caravanserai shares news. There have been heavy rains in the mountains. The rivers will be running high. They'll need to be careful at the fords. Also, there's a new village headman at one of the towns along the route, and nobody's sure yet what kind of tolls he'll demand for passage through his territory. This is useful information. Uarningirsu makes a mental note, adjusting his plans slightly. By evening, they've put perhaps 15 miles behind them. They make camp in an open area off the road. No tents, they'll sleep under the stars. The donkeys are hobbled and left to graze on what sparse vegetation exists. A small fire is built, more for light and comfort than warmth. The guards take their first watch, sitting at the edge of the firelight, spears across their knees, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. Uarningirsu lies on his back, looking up at the sky. The stars are magnificent out here, away from city lights. The ancient Mesopotamians were excellent astronomers. They tracked the movements of Venus and knew it was both the morning star and the evening star, the same celestial body appearing at different times. They identified the planets and many constellations. They understood that the heavens moved in regular, predictable patterns, which suggested that the gods who dwelt there were ordered and rational, operating by laws that could be understood. His son lies nearby, also looking up. "Father," the boy says quietly, "do you think we'll see the cedar forest this time?" "If the gods will it," Yuarnin-Gursu replies, which is the standard answer to any question about the future. Human beings can plan, can prepare, can work hard, but ultimately, outcomes depend on divine favor. You do your best and hope the gods smile on you. They fall silent. The fire crackles. Somewhere in the darkness, a jackal calls, an eerie sound that makes the donkeys shift nervously. But the guards are alert and the night passes safely. Days blur together. Walking, resting, camping. The landscape begins to change as they move north. The river plain gives way to rolling hills. Vegetation becomes more varied. There are actual trees here, not just palms. Pistachio. Wild olive. The air smells different, greener, sharper. They pass through several small towns, paying modest tolls at each. The new headman turns out to be reasonable, accepting a small bribe and a jar of sesame oil in exchange for safe passage. Everything is negotiable. Everything has a price. This is how trade works, how civilization works. Everyone gets something they need, and the caravan moves on. After 2 weeks, they reach the foothills of the mountains. The cedar forests are still days away, higher up, but already the air is different. Cooler, thinner, the scent of resin and stone. This is the edge of the known world for these river plain people. Beyond this, the mountains rise into territory that seems wild, untamed, where different gods hold sway. But it's also beautiful in a way that the flat plain never is. The mountains catch the clouds, creating dramatic plays of light and shadow. Water runs freely here, actual streams, not just irrigation ditches. The sound of moving water is everywhere, a constant gentle rushing that's deeply soothing after the silence of the plain. They make camp in a valley. The cedar forests rise above them on the mountain slopes, dark green against the blue sky. Tomorrow they'll meet with the local mountain people and begin the negotiations. But tonight they rest. Yuarnin-Gursu sits by the fire, feeling the deep satisfaction of a journey successfully made. He's brought his goods to market. He'll return with timber, with that precious cedar wood that's worth its weight in silver back home, that smells like heaven and lasts forever, that's strong enough to hold up the roof of a temple, that the gods themselves are said to favor. This is the alliance too, in its way. Not between gods and humans, but between different human communities, different landscapes, different resources. The plains have grain and textiles. The mountains have timber and stone. Neither can thrive without the other. And so caravans like this one, merchants like Yuarnin-Gursu, they're the threads that weave civilization together. The fire burns low. The stars wheel overhead. The mountain stands silent and eternal. And somewhere in all of this, you can rest too, letting the journey carry you into sleep. Midnight in the city of Babylon, around 1700 BCE, and we're climbing the stairs of a ziggurat, winding our way up the external staircase that spirals around this massive stepped pyramid of brick. The stairs are worn smooth by countless feet over countless years, and you have to watch your step in the darkness, even though oil lamps have been placed at intervals along the way. We're following a priest astronomer, a star watcher, who's about to begin his night's work. His name is Nabushar, and he's been doing this for 15 years, since he completed his training in the tablet house and was selected for this specialized role. Not every scribe becomes an astronomer. It requires a particular aptitude for mathematics, for patient observation, for finding patterns in seemingly chaotic data. The climb is long. Ziggurats are impressive from ground level, but climbing one really drives home just how much labor went into their construction. Thousands upon thousands of mud bricks, each one formed by hand, dried in the sun, laid carefully into place. These structures were built to last forever, to serve as the literal connection point between earth and heaven, the place where gods could descend to visit the human realm. We reach the top platform, slightly winded from the climb, and emerge into the clear night air. Up here, the wind is stronger, carrying the scent of the desert from the west and the river marshes from the south. The platform is flat, perhaps 30 feet on a side, with a small shrine structure at one end. This is the sanctuary of Marduk, the chief god of Babylon, though at this hour, no rituals are being performed. The shrine is simply present, a reminder of the divine gaze that watches everything. Nabushar sets down his bag, which contains his tools. A clay tablet, still slightly damp, ready to be inscribed. Several reed styluses. A water flask. A small oil lamp. And most importantly, his astronomical diary, a running record of observations that stretches back decades, each night's sightings carefully noted, each planetary position meticulously recorded. He takes a moment to simply stand and look. The sky is magnificent from up here. No city lights to obscure the view. Just the vault of heaven, studded with thousands of stars, the Milky Way flowing across the darkness like a river of light. It never stops being awe-inspiring, even after 15 years. The ancient Mesopotamians didn't see the stars the same way we do. We know they're distant suns, massive fusion reactors millions or billions of miles away. They knew only that they were lights in the sky, mysterious, beautiful, clearly important. They tracked them with obsessive precision, noting which stars rose at which times of year, how the planets moved against the background of fixed stars, and when eclipses occurred. They didn't understand the physics, but they understood the patterns. And patterns, they believed, were how the gods communicated. The movements of the heavens reflected divine will. By reading the sky, you could predict the future, or at least understand the present situation of the cosmic order. Nabushar begins his observations with Venus. She's visible in the west tonight, brilliant and steady. He notes her position relative to certain fixed stars, checking against his previous observations. Venus moves in a complex pattern, sometimes appearing as the evening star, sometimes as the morning star, sometimes disappearing entirely from view for weeks at a time. But the pattern is predictable if you watch long enough. And prediction is power. He inscribes his observations on the tablet. Year 16 of King Hammurabi. Month 3, Day 12. Venus was visible in the west, 2 fingers above the horizon, near the constellation of the Bull. His handwriting is neat, practiced, economical. Every word counts. Clay tablets are valuable, and besides, brevity is a virtue when you're recording observations night after night, year after year. Next he turns his attention to the moon. She's waxing about 3 days past new, a slender crescent hanging low in the western sky. The Mesopotamians used a lunar calendar, so the moon's phases were critically important. The month began when the first sliver of new moon became visible after sunset. Priests like Nabusharyuzer watched for that first sighting with the intensity of hawks watching for mice. The moon was also important for divination. Eclipses, especially, were considered hugely significant omens. A lunar eclipse could mean disaster for the king, for the nation. An elaborate ritual system existed to avert the evil portended by eclipses, including the practice of enthroning a substitute king during the dangerous period, so that if the evil fell, it would fall on the substitute rather than the real king. Which is kind of brilliant in a twisted way. Sorry, substitute king, but the gods have it in for rulers this week, so good luck with that. Nabusharyuzer notes the moon's position, her phase, her color. Tonight she's clear and bright, not reddened or dimmed, which is a good sign. A healthy moon means a healthy king means a healthy kingdom. Everything is connected. Hours pass in this way. He tracks the movements of Jupiter, the white star, associated with Marduk himself. He notes the rising of certain fixed stars, checking them against the tables of predicted rising times. He watches for meteors, which are always significant. At one point, he sees a shooting star streak across the northern sky, and he makes a careful note of its direction, its brightness, and the time of its appearance. This will be reported to the court astrologers in the morning, who will interpret its meaning. Have you ever sat up all night just watching the sky? It does something to your sense of time, your sense of self. The hours stop feeling like distinct units and start blurring together into a continuous flow. You become part of the darkness, part of the stillness. Your breathing slows. Your thoughts are quiet. You're just present, watching, witnessing. This is Nabusharyuzer's meditation, his spiritual practice. This is how he connects to the divine. Not through ecstatic visions or mystical experiences, but through patient, careful observation. Through numbers and positions and patterns. Through the discipline of showing up night after night, regardless of weather or mood or personal circumstances, to do the work of watching. Around 3 in the morning, a colleague joins him on the platform. They don't speak much, just a quiet greeting. The other priest takes up a position on the opposite side of the platform, begins his own observations. There's something companionable about this shared silence, this shared purpose. The stars wheel overhead, rotating around the celestial pole in their eternal dance. The constellations the Mesopotamians identified aren't quite the same as ours, but there's overlap. The bull, the scorpion, the lion, the winds. Ancient eyes looked at the same random scatter of stars we see and found pictures, patterns, meaning. As dawn approaches, the eastern sky begins to pale. One by one, the stars fade out, unable to compete with the coming sun. Nabusharyuzer makes his final observations, noting which stars are visible right up until the moment before sunrise. These heliacal risings, when a star first becomes visible just before dawn after a period of invisibility, were considered especially significant. The sun rises, sudden and golden. The day begins. The night's work is complete. Nabusharyuzer descends the ziggurat stairs, carefully carrying his inscribed tablet. He's tired, but it's good tired. I'm tired of work well done. The tiredness that leads to deep, satisfying sleep. He'll spend the morning copying his observations into the master archive, adding one more night's data to the centuries-long record. Then he'll sleep through the heat of the day, and tonight, he'll climb the stairs again, and watch again, and record again. This is the alliance in another form. Humans watching the sky on behalf of the gods. Or watching the sky to understand the gods. Or maybe the gods watching the earth through human eyes. The boundary blurs. The watcher and the watch become one. And as the sun climbs higher, as the day claims the world again, let yourself drift with Nabusharyuzer into that well-earned rest. Late morning in the city of Uar, around 2000 BC, and the market is alive with sound and color and movement. We're stepping into a weaver's workshop just off the main market square, a cool, dim space where the air is full of the smell of wool and dye and the gentle rhythmic sound of looms. The weaver's name is Gemidi Ishtar, and she's a master of her craft. She learned it from her mother, who learned from her mother, an unbroken line of knowledge stretching back to the first person who realized that you could twist fibers together to make something stronger than the individual threads. That you could interlace those threads to make fabric. That you could take the fleece from a sheep's back and turn it into cloth, into clothing, into warmth and beauty and value. Her workshop is larger than you might expect. Weaving is not a solitary craft in this time and place. Gemidishtar employs 5 other women, some young apprentices, some experienced journeywomen. They work together, their conversations rising and falling like birdsong, their hands never stopping the rhythmic push and pull of the loom work. The looms themselves are simple but elegant. Vertical looms, the warp threads hanging from a horizontal bar suspended from the ceiling beams, weighted at the bottom with clay loom weights. The weaver sits or stands before the loom, passing the weft thread through the warp, using a wooden sword to beat each pass of thread tight against the previous one. It's repetitive work, but repetitive in the way that meditation is repetitive. Your hands know what to do without conscious thought, leaving your mind free to wander, to think, to dream. Today they're working on an order from the temple. 20 bolts of linen cloth, to be used for priestly garments. Linen is more expensive than wool, requiring more labor to produce. You start with flax plants, which must be harvested, wet in water to separate the fibers, dried, combed, spun into thread. Each step is labor-intensive. Each step requires skill and patience. But the resulting fabric is cool, smooth, and beautiful, perfect for the hot climate, perfect for sacred use. The women are at different stages of the process. 2 are spinning thread, sitting with their spindles, the wooden shafts twirling as they draft the fibers out, thin and even. Their hands move with hypnotic grace, the motion as natural as breathing. Spin, wrap, spin, wrap. The growing thread winds around the spindle shaft, each revolution adding a few inches to the ever-lengthening yarn. 3 others are at the looms, weaving the spun thread into cloth. The sound of the looms is rhythmic, soothing. Clack, clack, swish. Clack, clack, swish. It's the heartbeat of the workshop, the pulse that everything moves to. Gemidishtar herself is at the dyeing vats today. She's preparing a special order, wool cloth to be dyed red with a madder root. Getting deep, even red is an art form. You have to prepare the wool with a mordant first, a metal salt solution that helps the dye bind to the fiber. Then multiple dye baths, each one deepening the color. It takes days to achieve the rich, brilliant red that wealthy customers demand. She stirs the dye pot with a long wooden paddle, checking the color of the wool submerged within. The heat from the fire beneath the pot makes this corner of the workshop uncomfortably warm, but that can't be helped. Dyeing requires heat. She adds a bit more dye powder, adjusts the fire. Her judgments are based on decades of experience. Too little dye and the color is pale, unsatisfying. Too much and it's wasteful, and dye materials are expensive. Market day means a steady stream of customers stopping by. A woman enters, looking for clothes to make a new dress. Geminishtar wipes her hands on her apron and greets her warmly. They haggle, but gently, both knowing that the price needs to be fair. The customer is a regular, a neighbor. Maintaining good relationships is more important than squeezing every last bit of profit from each transaction. The customer selects a bolt of wool cloth, dyed a soft blue with wood. She holds it up to the light streaming in from the doorway, checking the color, the texture, the evenness of the weave. She nods, satisfied. They agree on a price, measured in shekels of silver. But the customer doesn't have silver with her today, so instead they agree on a trade. She'll bring 2 large jars of honey next week. Honey for cloth. Both are valuable. Both are useful. The transaction works. This is how much of ancient commerce functioned. Not with money as we think of it barely existed yet, but with direct exchange. Goods for goods. Services for services. Your surplus for my surplus. The entire economy was a web of relationships and obligations and reciprocity. After the customer leaves, Geminishtar returns to her dye pot, but she's smiling. A good sale. And she loves honey. Her children will be thrilled. The hours pass peacefully. The sun moves across the sky, the angle of light in the workshop changing gradually. Around midday, they break for a meal. Barley bread, goat cheese, cucumbers, beer. Simple food, but nourishing. They eat together, the women chatting, sharing gossip from the neighborhood. Someone's daughter is getting married. Someone's son has been accepted for scribe training. Someone saw a good omen yesterday. A bird flew in a particularly auspicious direction. These small moments of community, of shared life, this is the fabric that holds civilization together. The grand temples and palaces and kings' edicts get recorded in history, but it's these everyday connections, these small kindnesses, these ordinary conversations that make life actually livable. After the meal, they return to work. One of the younger apprentices is struggling with her spinning. The thread keeps breaking, coming out lumpy and uneven. Geminishtar watches for a moment, then gently takes the spindle, demonstrating. "Your hands are too tense," she says. "Let the spindle do the work. You're just guiding it." She spins a length of thread, smooth and even, then hands the spindle back. The girl tries again, her face intense with concentration. This time, it's better. Not perfect, but better. She'll get there. Everyone starts rough. The afternoon wears on. The quality of light becomes golden, softer. The worst heat of the day is passing. Outside in the market, the vendors are starting to pack up, those who haven't sold everything. The volume of foot traffic is decreasing. Inside the workshop, the looms continue their steady rhythm. Clack, clack, swish. Clack, clack, swish. There's something eternal about this sound, this motion. Humans have been weaving for thousands of years. Humans will probably be weaving for thousands more. The technology might change, but the essential act, taking threads and making them into something unified, something useful, something beautiful that remains. Gemini Ishtar checks on her dye pot one last time. The wool has taken the color beautifully. A deep, rich red, the color of pomegranates, the color of sunset, the color of the finest robes. She lifts the wool out with her paddle, lets the excess dye drip back into the pot, then lays the wool out to begin drying. Tomorrow she'll rinse it, and it will be ready for the customer who ordered it. As evening approaches, the women begin to clean up their workspaces. The looms fall silent. The spindles are set aside. Tools are tidied, fibers are stored. Another day's work complete. Gemini Ishtar stands in the doorway for a moment, looking out at the market square. It's nearly empty now, just a few stragglers. The sun is low, painting everything in amber and rose. She feels the deep satisfaction of work well done, of craft practiced with care, of a business run honorably. This is her alliance with the divine, perhaps. Not through grand rituals or theological debates, but through simple, honest work. Through creating beauty. Through providing something useful. Through teaching the next generation. The gods gave humanity the arts of civilization, and every time she sits at the loom, every time she teaches an apprentice, every time she creates something from nothing, she's honoring that gift. The stars are beginning to emerge in the deepening blue above. Time to go home. Time to rest. And you too, let yourself rest now, wrapped in the soft comfort of ancient rhythms. The sun is setting over the city of Isen, around 1900 BCE, and we're walking through a walled garden that belongs to an ASU, a healer, a physician. The garden is small but intensely cultivated, every inch of space used for growing medicinal plants. The healer's name is Nasir. Yes, the same name as that infamous copper merchant who got a complaint tablet written about him, but this is a different person, a different era, and honestly a much more pleasant character. Nasir the healer has devoted his life to understanding the plants and minerals and practices that can ease suffering, cure disease, and maintain health. Step through the garden gate with me. The wall is high enough to provide privacy and protection from wind, and inside, the air is different. Humid, fragrant, alive with scents you can't quite identify but that somehow make you feel immediately calmer. The garden is organized in rectangular beds, each one dedicated to different plants. Here's a bed of garlic, the green shoots standing in neat rows. Garlic for infections, for fever, for general health. The Mesopotamians understood that garlic had protective properties, even if they didn't know about bacteria or immune systems. They just knew it worked. Next to the garlic, a bed of onions. Also medicinal, also protective. Then a bed of something with delicate fern-like leaves, fennel, used for digestive complaints. And here, a plant with gray-green fuzzy leaves, sage, for inflammation, for women's complaints, for respiratory issues. Nasir moves slowly through his garden, checking each plant, his hands gentle as he touches leaves, assesses growth, removes any weeds that have appeared since his last inspection. He's been maintaining this garden for 20 years. He knows each plant intimately, knows what it needs, knows when to harvest, knows how to prepare it for use. Gardening is a form of medicine in itself, he thinks. The quiet work with hands in soil. The patient observation of growth cycles. The cooperation with nature rather than domination of it. His patients often comment that they start feeling better just by stepping into this garden, before he's even given them any treatment. In one corner, there's a pomegranate tree, its branches heavy with developing fruit. pomegranate for intestinal parasites, the rind dried and powdered, the juice for fever. Every part is useful. Along the back wall, he's training a grapevine. Grapes for wine, but also the leaves for poultices, the tendrils for certain preparations. Nothing wasted. There's a small pond, just a clay-lined depression filled with water, and growing in it are water plants, reeds that can be used for treating burns, and something with broad leaves that's good for skin conditions. Nasir settles on a stone bench near the pond, allowing himself a moment of rest. His work is demanding. People come to him with all manner of ailments. Some he can help, some he cannot. He's learned over the years to be honest about his limitations. False hope is cruel, but he's also learned that often his most powerful medicine isn't a potion or poultice. It's simply being present with someone in their suffering, listening, acknowledging, bearing witness. The human needs to be seen, to be heard, to be taken seriously. That's as fundamental as the need for food or water. He practices a combination of what we might call natural medicine and spiritual healing, because in his worldview, these aren't separate categories. The body and spirit are one. Disease can have physical causes, bad food, foul water, injury, but it can also have spiritual causes. Possession by demons, curse from an enemy, displeasure of a god. For physical ailments, he has his plants. Willow bark for pain and fever, the same compound that would eventually become aspirin. Poppy for more severe pain. Yes, they knew about opium. Aloe for burns. Clay poultices for infections. Honey for wounds, and modern research has confirmed that honey is actually an excellent antimicrobial agent. For spiritual ailments, he works with incantations, with amulets, with ritual purifications. He might prescribe a visit to a temple, an offering to a particular god, a cleansing bath with special herbs. He might write out a protective formula on a clay tablet for the patient to wear around their neck. Does it work? Well, it depends on what you mean by work. The placebo effect is real and powerful. The sense of being cared for, of doing something proactive, of having a treatment plan, these things themselves have healing properties. And the spiritual practices provide comfort, reduce anxiety, give people a sense of control in situations that feel uncontrollable, which is valuable even if no physical cure occurs. A young woman arrives at the garden gate, hesitant. Nasir rises and goes to greet her. She's pregnant, she tells him, and has been having terrible morning sickness. Can he help? He can. He walks her through the garden, showing her the plants he'll use. Ginger root, which he'll prepare as a tea. Mint leaves, which she can chew. He gives her a small cloth bag of the dried herbs, explaining how to prepare them. No charge. She's a neighbor, and besides, this is his calling. He was taught these skills by the gods, or at least that's how he understands it. To charge the poor for healing would be to betray that divine gift. She thanks him profusely and leaves. He returns to his bench, satisfied. A small thing but important. Easing suffering. Making life a bit more bearable. The light is fading now. The garden in twilight has a magical quality. The plants seem to glow slightly, or maybe that's just a trick of the low light. Night-blooming flowers are beginning to open. He has a few jasmine plants along the wall, their scent becoming stronger as darkness falls. He thinks about the alliance between gods and humans. In his field, it's very direct. The gods taught humans the healing arts. Ninasina, goddess of healing. Gula, another healing goddess. Damu, the god of restoration. Each had their specialties, their particular areas of expertise. And human healers were their representatives on earth, their hands in the world of flesh and pain. When he heals someone, Asir believes he's not working alone. He's channeling divine power. His hands are guided. His intuition is inspired. The plants themselves are gifts from the gods, each one containing a spark of divine compassion. It's a beautiful way to think about medical practice, really. The healer as sacred intermediary. The treatment of prayer made it physical. The garden is a temple. Bats are beginning to emerge from their daytime roosts, flitting through the twilight air, catching insects. He watches them for a while, appreciating their graceful, erratic flight. Bats are good for the garden. They eat the pest. Everything is in balance. Everything in its place. A neighbor calls a greeting from beyond the wall. He calls back. The sounds of the city settling into evening. Voices. Laughter. Somewhere, a baby was crying. The normal sounds of human life continuing its eternal patterns. Nasir rises, does one more circuit of the garden, whispering a brief prayer of thanks. Thanks for the plants. Thanks for the knowledge. Thanks for another day to serve, to help, to heal. He closes the garden gate behind him, heading home. Tomorrow he'll return. Check on the plants. See patients. Mix medicines. Listen to suffering. Offer comfort. But tonight, rest. And you too rest now, held safe in the garden's peace. Early evening in the city of Shuruppak, around 2600 BCE, and we're sitting in a potter's workshop, watching an elderly craftsman named Utnapishtim work at his wheel. Yes, that Utnapishtim, or rather, a man who shares the name with the hero of the flood story, the Mesopotamian Noah. It's a common name, meaning something like, he found life, and our potter has lived up to it, having survived to the impressive age of 65 in a time when life expectancy was much shorter. The workshop is peaceful at this hour. The day's work is mostly done. Utnapishtim is working on a special commission, a large storage jar that will be used in the temple. He's taking his time, getting it exactly right. The potter's wheel is a simple wooden disc mounted on a vertical axle. He spins it with his foot while his hands shape the clay rising from the center. It's mesmerizing to watch. The formless lump of clay centering itself as the wheel spins. His hands, stained permanently gray from years of working with clay, press and pull and coax the clay upward, outward, shaping it into a vessel. Have you ever watched a potter at work? There's something almost magical about it. The way solid clay becomes fluid under the skilled touch. The way form emerges from formlessness. Creation in miniature, happening right before your eyes. Utnapishtim's grandson sits nearby, watching intently. The boy is 7, just old enough to start learning the craft. He's tried the wheel a few times, with predictable results, wobbly, lopsided pots that collapsed or cracked. But that's how everyone starts. His grandfather was patient. The clay will teach you, he said. Just keep trying. Let your hands learn what your mind cannot explain. As the jar takes shape, the boy asks, "Grandfather, why are you named after the flood hero?" Utnapishtim smiles without looking away from his work. "My father named me that. He said everyone should have a reminder of how precious life is, how quickly everything can change." "Tell me the story again," the boy says. And so, as the wheel spins and the clay rises, Utnapishtim tells the ancient tale. How the gods grew angry with humanity for some reason. The texts aren't entirely clear why. Too much noise, perhaps. Humans multiplying too rapidly. Whatever the reason, the gods decided to send a flood to wipe out humanity. But Ea, the wise god who loved humanity, couldn't bear to let everyone die. He warned one man, Utnapishtim the Ancient, told him to build a boat, to seal it with pitch, to bring aboard his family and craftsmen and animals and seeds, to save the core of civilization from the coming destruction. The rain fell for 7 days and 7 nights. The floods covered everything. The boat tossed on the waters, everyone inside terrified, praying. And then, finally, the waters receded. The boat grounded on a mountaintop. Utnapishtim sent out birds to test whether land had emerged. First a dove, which returned. Then a swallow, which also returned. Finally a raven, which did not return, meaning it had found somewhere to land. Utnapishtim the Ancient made offerings to the gods, who smelled the sweet savor and remembered that perhaps humanity wasn't so bad after all. And as a reward for his faithfulness, Utnapishtim was granted immortality, taken to live with the gods themselves. The boy has heard this story dozens of times, but he never tires of it. It's the foundational story of his culture, the explanation of why the world is the way it is, why floods happen, why the gods sometimes seem angry and sometimes kind, why human life is precious and fragile. "Do you think it really happened, grandfather?" the boy asks. Utnapishtim considers this while he shapes the rim of the jar, his fingers smoothing the clay into a perfect circular edge. "Something happened," he says finally. "The rivers flood every year. Sometimes the floods are worse than others. Maybe once, long ago, there was a flood so terrible that it seemed like the whole world was drowning. And maybe a wise man built a boat and saved his household. The gods work through nature. The flood was both natural and divine." It's a sophisticated answer, showing a worldview that doesn't separate natural and supernatural into rigid categories. The flood is weather and divine judgment simultaneously. The boat is practical engineering and religious obedience simultaneously. Everything is both material and spiritual. The jar is nearly complete. Utnapishtim slows the wheel, making final adjustments to the shape. Then he carefully removes it, lifting it onto a wooden board to dry. Tomorrow, when it's leather hard, he'll add handles, maybe some decorative lines. Then days of slow drying, and finally, firing in the kiln, transforming soft clay into stone-hard ceramic. Pottery is one of humanity's great inventions. The ability to take common clay and turn it into containers that can hold water, store grain, cook food. Before pottery, you were limited to what you could carry in your hands or in baskets or in animal skin bags. After pottery, you could save surplus, store food for winter, carry water long distances. The invention of pottery was the invention of settled life, in many ways. And the potter's wheel itself, spinning, creating round forms with ease, was a technological leap. Before the wheel, pots were built by hand, coil by coil. With the wheel, a skilled potter could produce in a day what would have taken a week before. Utnapishtim stands, stretches his back. He's been sitting for hours. The boy helps him clean up, sweeping clay scraps into a bucket. Nothing is wasted. The scraps will be reconstituted and reused. They bank the fire in the kiln, making sure it's safe to leave overnight. As they work, the boy says, "Grandfather, if the gods sent a flood once, could they send another one?" They could, Utnapishtim admits. But they made a promise, didn't they? They regretted the flood. They decided to find other ways to deal with problems. The rainbow, some stories say, is the sign of that promise. As long as the rainbow appears after storms, the world is safe. The boy seems satisfied with this. They lock up the workshop and walk home through the evening streets. The city is settling into its nighttime rhythms. Lamps being lit in windows. The smell of cooking. Children being called in from play. Utnapishtim thinks about the story he just told, the story he's named after. The alliance between gods and humans is complicated in that tale. The gods created humans, grew frustrated with them, tried to destroy them, were persuaded to show mercy, and ultimately renewed the relationship on different terms. It's a story about limits. About the gods recognizing that they couldn't just undo creation when it became inconvenient. About humans recognizing that they lived at divine pleasure, that their existence was contingent, that hubris was dangerous. But it's also a story about partnership. Saving Utnapishtim. Utnapishtim saving the seeds of civilization. The gods smelling the sacrifice and remembering why they created humans in the first place. The alliance was rebuilt after the catastrophe. As they reach home, the boy's mother has dinner waiting. Barley stew, bread, dates. Simple food, but it tastes divine after a day of work. They eat together, a family, 3 generations, bound by blood and craft and story. After dinner, the boy falls asleep quickly, exhausted. Utnapishtim sits outside for a while, enjoying the cool evening air. The stars are emerging, brilliant against the darkening sky. He thinks about clay and water and fire, the 3 elements of his craft. Clay from the earth, water that shapes it, fire that transforms it. Everything is transformation. Everything is change. Even stone was mud once. Even mud will be stone eventually. And humans too, the old stories said, were made from clay. Shaped by divine hands. Animated by divine breath. Transformed by divine fire into living beings. We're all pottery in a sense. Formed with care. Hardened by experience. Useful vessels for whatever purpose we're given. The moon rises, casting silver light. Time to sleep. And you too, let the potters will spin you down into dreams. We're in the city of Uruk one last time, though centuries have passed since we first visited. It's now around 2000 BCE, and we're in the great library of the temple complex, where thousands of clay tablets are stored in neat rows on wooden shelves. An old scribe named Ludingira is working late into the night, copying a text that's already ancient even in his time. It's a hymn to the relationship between gods and humans, a philosophical text that tries to articulate why this alliance exists, what it means, how it should be maintained. The library is quiet except for the scratch of his stylus and the occasional settling sound of the building. Oil lamps provide just enough light to work by. The shadows are deep and comfortable. Ludingira has been copying texts for 50 years. He's one of the most respected scribes in Uruk, sought after for difficult projects, and trusted with the most sacred writings. His eyes are failing now, he admits, though he resists admitting it to anyone else. But he can still make out the old wedge-shaped marks, still render them accurately on fresh clay. The text he's copying tonight speaks of the original agreement. How the gods, weary from the labor of maintaining the cosmos, created humans to share that burden. But instead of creating slaves, they created partners. Beings with intelligence, with creativity, with the ability to improve on divine plans. The gods taught humans agriculture, so humans wouldn't starve. But humans improved on teaching, developing irrigation, crop rotation, and selective breeding. The gods taught humans writing, so they could record divine wisdom. But humans expanded writing to record everything: business, poetry, law, history, science. The partnership was generative. Each side contributed. Each side benefited. Yes, humans served the gods. But the gods also served humans, protecting them, inspiring them, loving them in their own distant, complicated way. Ludingira pauses to rest his hand. His fingers are cramped. He's not as young as he used to be. He looks around the library, at the thousands of tablets, each one containing knowledge, story, data, wisdom. This room is humanity's memory, preserved in clay, resistant to time and decay. He thinks about all the people whose words fill this room. Scribes like himself, copying texts, but also kings proclaiming victories, priests recording rituals, merchants noting transactions, poets composing epics, mathematicians working out problems, astronomers tracking the heavens, parents writing letters to distant children, teachers create lessons, healers documenting cures. Every tablet is a voice crying out across time. I was here. I thought. I felt. I knew things that mattered. And in a sense, isn't that what the alliance between gods and humans is really about? The divine ensures that the human matters. That human life isn't random or meaningless. That there's a cosmic context, a larger story, a place in the order of things. We need that, Ludingira thinks. We need to matter. We need to be seen. We need to know that our struggles and joys are witnessed by something greater than ourselves. The gods provide that witness. And humans, in turn, witness the gods. Make them real through worship and story. Give them form through art and architecture. Keep them alive through ritual and remembrance. It's symbiotic, mutual, neither complete without the other. He returns to his copying. The text is beautiful in its simplicity. Let humans tend the gardens. Let the gods send rain. Let humans build temples. Let the gods dwell within. Let humans offer praise. Let the gods offer protection. Let the alliance stand eternal, from the first city to the last, from the first word to the final silence. As Ludingira inscribes these words, he feels connected to something vast. To every scribe who has ever lived, copying words from older tablets onto newer ones, preserving the chain of knowledge. To every person who has ever looked up at the stars and felt the presence of something greater. To every farmer who has planted seeds with a prayer for growth. To every merchant who has traded fairly, honoring divine laws of reciprocity. To every parent who has told their child the old stories, passing on the culture, keeping it alive. The alliance isn't just between gods and humans in the abstract. It's between every individual and the cosmos. It's the promise that your life is part of a pattern, that your actions echo in eternity, that nothing is wasted or forgotten. He finishes the tablet as midnight passes into the deepest part of night. He sets it aside to dry, this one more copy of an ancient text, this one more link in the chain. Standing, he extinguishes most of the lamps, leaving just one burning low in case anyone needs to access the library before dawn. He walks slowly toward the exit, his joints stiff from hours of sitting. At the doorway, he pauses and looks back. The library stretches into shadow, rows and rows of human thought, human feeling, human life preserved and honored. The gods are present here too, he thinks. Dwelling in the words. Living in the stories. Real because we make them real. He steps out into the cool night air. The temple complex is silent. The city sleeps. Above, the stars wheel in their eternal patterns, watched by no one at this hour except perhaps some lone astronomer on a distant ziggurat. Ludinjira walks home slowly, through empty streets, past shuttered buildings. He's tired but content. One more day's work complete. One more tablet added to the archive. One more brick in the endless construction of human culture. Tomorrow, other scribes will come to the library. They'll read the tablets. Copy new ones. Add to the collection. The work continues, generation after generation, an endless relay race carrying knowledge forward through time. And perhaps, Ludinjira thinks, perhaps thousands of years from now, someone will find these tablets we've made. We'll decipher the writing. We'll read our words. We'll know that we existed, that we thought and felt and dreamed. That would be a kind of immortality. Not the literal immortality of Utnapishtim the flood hero, but immortality nonetheless. To be remembered. To be known. To echo forward through the ages. He reaches his home, enters quietly so as not to wake his family. His sleeping mat feels wonderfully soft after the hard bench of the library. He lies down, his body relaxing, tension draining away. He thinks of the words he copied tonight, the eternal alliance. Gods and humans joined in the great work of maintaining existence, creating beauty, finding meaning. We're not alone, those ancient words say. We never were. From the first moment of consciousness, we've been in relationship with something greater. Call it gods. Call it the divine. Call it the cosmos. Call it meaning itself. The boundary is thin. Heaven and earth touch. The divine and the human merge. And in that merging, in that alliance, we find our purpose. We found our home. Ludinjira's breathing slows. He drifts toward sleep. Around him, the city sleeps. Across Mesopotamia, thousands of cities sleep. Millions of people, all connected by the same stories, the same gods, the same fundamental understanding of how reality works. The alliance holds. The pattern continues. Life goes on. And 5,000 years later, here you are listening to these stories, connecting across that vast gulf of time. The tablets survived. The words survived. The alliance survived, transformed but recognizable, still offering the same comfort, the same assurance. You are seen. You are known. You matter. The gods and humans, still in partnership, still in conversation, still building something together across the infinite sweep of time. May these ancient memories guide you into the softest dreams tonight. May you rest in the knowledge that you are part of an old, old story that has no ending. May you wake tomorrow refreshed, renewed, connected to the eternal pattern. If these whispers helped you drift off, let me know in the comments, but only if you wish. No pressure. Just gratitude. Sweet dreams, friend. Sweet dreams. Good night.